Thank you. So the session is about decentralized autonomous organizations. So it sounds a bit sexy in a way, right? I like the acronym. So I think it has also become sort of synonymous in a way to the Web3 phenomenon. So we'll just get to the bottom of it during the panel. So we have very distinguished speakers for the panel. I like them to introduce themselves. I think it's better if they do it for themselves rather than I do for themselves.
I'll start up. Evgeni Mitkov, 10 years to this day in the crypto space. I've gone through the Bitcoin stage, through the ICO stage, through the CDBC stage, even was involved in the Central Bank of Bahamas CDBC development, crypto options, DeFi space, and seen quite a bit of it through the years.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Gigo Joseph. So I work for a company called Chainyard. We are one of the leading blockchain services firm based out of North Carolina in the United States, in the US. So on the enterprise blockchain, it's been like, if you heard about Hyperledger Fabric, we were the very first team who actually was part of the initial creation of the Fabric onboard. So we did a lot of work on enterprise. So regarding this DAO, on the enterprise side, how do you create a DAO? So those are the areas we researched a lot for the governance aspect. It's been 70 years since I'm in the blockchain space.
Okay, so hi everyone. You can learn. So my name is Sergey, and I'm the founder of Linder, and I'll speak afterwards about the fintech for environment and like the carbon markets. But thanks for the invitation. I think it's fun to participate because I'm a big enthusiast of the DAOs, and I believe in kind of community power, the flock power, which is kind of the opposite a bit of the government coordination and the corporates. So I think that's the power of individuals. So DAO speaks to my heart a lot. So I've been involved in crypto, since 2015, where we started the exchange in Switzerland that was supposed to tokenize all different assets, to put them on chain, to make them tradable, like this big vision of that everything will be digitized. Not everything, but something was still like possible to tokenize. And so then now I'm deeply involved in more like carbon markets, how to make the carbon projects investable and make those environmental connection. But happy to chat about DAOs.
Well, thank you very much for
it's a personal passion.
So, I know that Sergey is one of the big names in that space, so that's why I just wanted to have him, since he was already in the room, have him on the panel. So let's start with the first one, right? DAO 101. What exactly is it?
I would say it's nation building.
Oh, okay.
What's really interesting is if you look around your neighborhood, the people you live with, you have very little in common in general. But if you're interested in rocket science or you're interested in carbon credits, you'd find that the guy or the gal that's working with that in the next country, you have a lot more in common than your next door neighbor. So if you go from that, or a teacher in one country has a lot more in common with a teacher in another country than they do with the next door neighbor. So if you go from that sort of logic, people with similar interests and with the internet in place can now gather around and really work on a similar projects very easily compared to what we had in the good old days. You really had to get together at a conference in Istanbul in order to exchange ideas and work on projects. So DAOs effectively allowed that sort of cooperation to exist on a decentralized basis from around the world and bring people with similar interests, both for the long term, but also for ad hoc, which is, I think, one of the most powerful things of DAOs is to create a DAO ad hoc for something that is of interest right now. And I think one of the most powerful examples in that was...
I'm sorry to interrupt. What do you mean by ad hoc? Like it could be a charity, it could be this, civil society program?
Correct. So
it could be anything.
Let me give you probably the best example in that. A copy of the U.S. Constitution was coming up for auction, and a number of people felt that that should not go and fall into private hands. So they created a DAO, and within a couple of weeks, raised the 41 or 42 million.
It was 47.
Yeah, 45 they raised, I think. Then they had legal expenses, so they could bid only up to 41.5.
41.5 was the number.
They had some legal expenses and other things to cover. So they didn't win it.
But that's the problem with blockchain and open information. Everybody knows how much money they can bid up to.
Yeah. So the
Of course, our good old friend Ken Griffin knew that they can bid up to 41 and a half, so he bid up 41.6 or whatever he wanted for a couple of $1,000s more, right above them.
Yeah, really.
Yes, it was really sad from that perspective. But here at Hawk, if you feel passionate about something, you're certainly going to find people around the world that also feel passionate about that, and this allows the generation of a society as well as the financial aspects of it in order to be able to make this happen.
Gigo.
Yeah, I think it's very well explained. I mean, there is nothing much to add to that. Just add on to that example. So the people with that passion came in for Constitution DAO. Then they didn't win, and that people can decide what to do with that money. There's a lot of people decided, so that's the beauty of this DAO, right? A lot of people decided, let's invest in something else. But some people said, no, money was raised only for this purpose, let's give back to people, right? So that decision was again taken by the community together, again using the voting process. And the whole concept of DAO was not new. In 1990, there's a German scientist actually coined this DAO concept. But until the blockchain and smart contract were there, it was not feasible to implement it.
Because you don't have the financial.
You don't have that network to. You don't have a trusted logic system, a smart contract, who will execute what it was told to execute, right? So until that system framework was not there for people to do that. And even if you take historically a bit back, right? I think in the 17th century, we started the common stock model of shares for people to work together, right? And that once that common stock was started, after 200 years or 19th century beginning, people realized that there is a liability issue with this one, right? The owners of the shares are liable for unlimited liability there. So they came up with this unlimited liability protection there, right? So if you look at DAO, is a new way of people to work together with the existing framework. It is a progress from common stock to LLC to the DAO, and now this Wyoming state has come up with a DAO LLC. Like even we are bringing in limited liability to DAO also.
I think Delaware has also some.
Delaware also has come up with something. Yeah. Wyoming is the first one come up with that.
Actually, Switzerland was the first. I mean,
they have a program called it's called.
the first DAOs were really.
Some other different name. Yeah.
It wasn't. Apologies. It was not meant for digital autonomous organizations, but they had the concept of a humanless organization, and that's how most of the initial DAOs were registered in Switzerland.
So you said some big words in terms of defining DAO. Nation building. I think it's a bit, I don't know, is it too big?
It could be too small.
Oh, okay. So I like the way you put it, by the way. It's very thought-provoking at least. So what Gigo said is, I think it's the connectivity with the real world, practice of it. I mean, in terms of these limited liability companies, here and there. And apparently the governments, not at the federal level yet, but some of the U.S. governments, including Switzerland apparently, I didn't know that part. So they started putting that framework into their legislations. That is something interesting. So Sergey, how do you see the practice in terms of that? I mean, are we really reflecting fully in terms of the potential of DAOs? Apparently there's some progress, right? And from the concept to the regulations to the practice, how is it going there?
Yeah, there's this intersection of the decentralized world with the real world, which is always tricky, and like it's the boundaries where all the magic happens. For me, like the DAOs is more like internet organization. So ideally, it should have no intersection with the real world, like in a sense, just it's a society, it's community with a bank account, like it's defined. So it's a community which can govern together certain kind of allocation of assets and what they do together. They can vote, make decisions, issue token, which can reward, the work of the community. So like it's a lot of things they can do without touching the real world. As soon as they touch the real world, let's say they want to do something in the real world, like planting trees or something like this, then of course they become like, they step on some jurisdiction, and then they have to define maybe they need a bank account in the real world to take the money and pay for the work in fiat money. And then they have to find the jurisdiction which is friendly to the DAO and then incorporate the DAO, which I've seen a few jurisdictions can do this. Like the latest example which I had is with the guys once we collaborated with, they are from Estonia, and they created an organization which the charter of it is governed by the DAO. Like its DAO is embedded in the charter organization. So it's now possible in Estonia. You can have something which is legal, with a bank account, but is governed with the token, voting, and that's I think the new life forms, they will evolve.
So, internet organizations, internet sort of communities in a way, nation building to community and this, and I think this could be different definitions, but it's the same meaning in a way at the end of the day. And I'm sure that the audience who are from Turkey, from Istanbul, they're aware of the fact that we have, for example, these stray dogs, stray animals, right, on the street. And
lots of them.
And we have this story, in the 19th century, and Istanbulians, they're in love with the stray dogs and stray cats. We have a lot of stories with that, but I think it was 1890s. The government decided to expel them to this island in the Marmara Sea Marmara, right? So because of the complaints of some of the residents, they shipped some of them to the island. Apparently, a majority of the population of the city residents, they started complaining about the whole banishment of the dogs. So they had to bring them back. So that island is called Dog Island still. But the point is, there's this charity understanding, the whole community, right? We see such internet communities, for example,
But that was an 18th century, 19th century DAO.
Absolutely. But we are just basically putting an angle to it, which is basically just this Web3 sort of monetization of it in a way, as well as governance into it. So, let's assume that we have this community that is active on Facebook. If you just basically connect this with this DAO structure, I think it would be this whole monetized, association in a way, or charity. Is it?
That's
exactly what it is? Okay.
That's exactly what it is. And again, I think that distinction between something that's planned with a long-term goal with very similar interests versus the ad hoc creation because an issue has arisen and people with similar opinion or values come around to support that. I think both of those are extremely powerful, especially the ad hoc one. It's a very powerful democracy tool. It's a very powerful way for people to rally behind an important topic or issue and actually put their both brain and financial resources together, which is obviously extremely needed in the current world that's unfortunately is heading in the wrong direction of totalitarian, more totalitarian leniency than democratic leniency.
So that's why it is called decentralized, you know.
Correct.
That includes the governance, voting, decision making too, right?
Right.
Gigo.
Yeah. But the challenge is again, right? I mean, so when you are coming from a theoretical, beautiful concept into more of the practical limitations, challenges here, right? So the things in this one worries me most is the anonymity of the people, right? You can have an organization with everybody is anonymous. So anonymous users are okay, but when the creators themselves become anonymous, you could get into a situation like, let's say, one anonymous person wrote a smart contract for the governance of this particular program, and another anonymous person voted on it, agreed, like audited it, and approved and went in there. What is the whole program was a Ponzi scheme. And those two people, anonymous people,
Or one and the same.
those two anonymous people were part of some organization who is actually raising money. And after, let's say, 3 months down the line, some problem with that smart contract, oh, I have a bug in the smart contract, the money is taken out. And just because of I bought some coins, I bought some regulatory network tokens from the market, and the government tracked me down. Hey, you are a member of that.
Yeah, you're now by association.
You are a member of the association, and you voted for that particular program, and you raised money. I'm going to put you behind jail. You are liable for that.
Well, thank you very much.
There are actually quite a few challenges. Maybe we should address them with DAOs that need to.
That,
Yeah.
I'd like to sort of finalize the potential part.
Definitely.
Because the title of the panel, even though that's not me, he's a better good-looking guy. So unfortunately, his wife had to deliver early.
Oh.
So that's why he had to stay in Paris, in France. So I'm just a substitute here. So my name is Mustafa Baltacı, by the way. Sorry about that. I missed that out. So Sergey, so the title goes, are DAOs really game changers? What do you think?
There's definitely a next generation of the kind of the life forms of organizations. So we'll see them in a way in the boundary first, but then they become maybe central to some of the problems, especially when it's cross-border, when it's kind of international sort of, and they can also solve some problems better than international organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hopefully. Yeah, we'll see about that. I think the time will show us, basically, what is working and what is not.
Right.
And that brings us to what you were saying, the challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there are some DAOs that are quite successful. There are some DAOs that are highly criticized,
Right.
not only by the regulator, but also
By
the
their own
participants.
community.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the great thing is competition. What's great about DAOs is that if you don't like something, you can go create another one very easily,
Fork it.
and potentially attract with it the right-minded people to it. But the challenges are very big because we're walking quite a new ground. And I think the biggest challenge actually is one of the smallest ones, but it trips most DAOs most of the time. And that's, how do you vote on actions? And some DAOs, and the ones that have been really highly criticized and the ones that have almost failed, are the ones that end up having $50,000 people discussing how to spend $50. And that's probably the biggest challenge with in a lot of the DAOs is, how do you do day-to-day operations with such a big group of people, and how do you, because if you're too decentralized, then you end up wasting everybody's time on the minutia, frankly speaking. So that needs to be, and when DAOs are created, this sort of thing needs to really be thought through. Otherwise, it's the small stone that will trip up the whole DAO. And again, it's all about thinking about all the different scenarios.
Right.
If you're creating an ad hoc DAO about a purpose, and what happens after that purpose is gone to this, right? So there are a lot of the problematic DAOs just had too many open ends and too much.
Also loose ends, not only open.
Loose and open ends, exactly, and at the same time, voting on everything for how do we spend $50? You know, those are the things.
That's poor governance.
That's very poor governance indeed.
Yeah, our early days, right? I mean, they put a blockchain for everything. Like, I think Starbucks or someone put blockchain so that the stock price went up, right?
Yeah.
So like that, after a few years, people started using DAO for everything, right?
Yes.
If I start a project, I'll put DAO, blockchain, DeFi, everything, so that, just for the creating the hype. So if you really look, there are certain projects, like I think when I looked, I found 3-4 areas. One is community building. You wanted to do certain aspect as a community. Then investing, certain investment areas, like DeFi. Most of the DeFi comes under that, like Maker DAO comes under that. ESG, on the social impact project, there's a lot of community comes in. There is DAO for it. Then, if you wanted to create, I think one example you brought up already. If you wanted to create if you have a decentralized project, you wanted a community to manage that, govern that, so you create a coin around that. So these are only the 4 areas. When I looked, I found that this DAO will be successful. But again, there are a lot of challenges, like he said. One challenge I found, like so many people working. The opposite of that is nobody turn up for voting.
Yeah.
The other side of that.
Yes.
Then so many people coming in, creating mess. Many chefs mess up the food, right? So that people created with a delegation of authority. So they create a committee inside the whole thing, right? So major issues only will come into the larger crowd, right? Smaller issues get always day-to-day things get addressed within that smaller community. So people are trying with many experiments, and with the CC now coming with all this challenging everybody. Even the DAO is also is a virtual currency or is an asset.
It's a security.
It's a security, right? So now you need to think about taxation issues, security issues. Now you need to think about, like, let's say if you are a DAO lives only in the internet, then how do you write a contract to an employee to join, or how do you write a contract to the cloud service provider to have a space, right? So all kinds of, so when finally the rubber meets the road, right? We say, you need to.
This is a particular issue in the European Union because, you need to be able to employ somebody. You need to be a company, right? So DAOs have particular problem in the European Union employing people.
I think some of the jurisdictions, they've been trying to tackle this part. I heard that Swiss government is working on it. So apparently this is a trustee issue, right?
Yeah.
And since the participants, they invest some money, let's put it this way, some money, some wealth, some assets into this structure. So it needs to be trusted, it needs to be secured well, it needs to be managed well, run well. It's not only about governance, voting, and this and that. There should be this legal entity attached to it that would be under the spotlight, by the regulator. So there would be this guidance in terms of the investor protection. That's why, for example, SEC and some treasury officials have been sort of criticizing about the DAOs in the U.S., including the ones in Wyoming and Delaware too.
That's really funny that the federal government is really
absolutely
going against the state government, which is actually a state issue, not a federal government.
But whenever it comes to investor protection, it's the federal level. Yeah. That's how they see it, I guess. I think it's almost the same thing, almost almost any country around the world. So, Sergey, what do you think about the challenges, in terms of the final touch on the round?
Yeah, I mean, the anonymity, you mentioned this fact that it's sometimes not great because there could be bad acting kind of hidden by the anonymity of actors. At the same time, some DAOs doing the stuff which is kind of near the area where regulation should sort of come in and basically kill the whole model. Think of the Uniswap, right? It's the decentralized exchange, which is run on smart contract, and still it's an exchange, and people can list assets there, which can be securities. So it means that it trades something like a security exchange, like it should be regulated by the, in every country, basically. Right. And still it's open, permissionless. Everybody uses this because it's so easy and so comfortable to use, and no KYC, those inclusivity aspect. And so, the creator of those who basically run the Uniswap, they should be ideally liable, but what I think if they would be liable, then we'll not see this innovation. So I think anonymity, in a way, it's a way to kind of avoid this, let's say, problem of enforcement, and if they are the good actors, and if it's transparent on chain, if somebody kind of puts the smart contract and the community reviews the open source code, and then and then it's transparently deployed and it's, like there is no backdoors, then people will trust it to use it, like the Uniswap thing. So I think that's the way, and I think, of course, regulation is powerful. We all kind of use that somebody will come and protect us. At the same time, it can stiff the innovation like to an existence. So I would prefer that we have this layer of where the innovation happens, maybe not regulated, maybe it shouldn't be regulated at all, and it could be self-regulated, ideally.
I think in terms of the perception towards these non-regulated entities, whenever it is good times and they are yielding good, right? and
it crashes.
Well, I mean, people are quite happy. Oh, I mean, we are pro-decentralized entities, this and that. Whenever it goes down, well, there the complaints, begin. So
from the same people that were very much in favor of it.
I think there's a learning curve with that. I mean, Sergey, what you were saying, maybe they should be, fully non-regulated, unregulated. Well, I like the way you say it, but I think it is just an elusive dream at the moment. That's what I see. So that's why, I mean, the regulators, have been pressurizing these, entities in a way.
I think there's a clear distinction. If you look at, for example, the FATF regulation for anti-money laundering, they say of the certain virtual asset service providers, and for example, the DAOs and DeFi contracts can be those kind of actors if they're not decentralized enough. For example, if there is an organization behind the smart contract, if they have a controls over the keys, then they can be enforced and liable for this, to this anti-money laundering regulation. But if they are decentralized enough, so that there is no way, basically, so it's run on a smart contract, it's immutable, no one is controlling the smart contract, they're governed by the, more or less without collusion, there's a community which governs this, everybody contributes, open source, then it could be like this new sort of things which not necessarily, and this cannot be regulated. I think this is the definition, the distinction.
And that's the real power of DAOs.
Yeah.
The fact that you really can stay above national law and national regulations and still operate, and nobody can shut it down. Unless, of course, you shut down the internet.
I think the discussion will continue for a long while. And the standpoint of SEC and the alike regulators are basically, Bitcoin is the only decentralized protocol, the real one. The rest, basically, they are just equity, fundraise projects. So that's why they need to be considered as securities. It applies and it appeals to some of the DAO projects, so that's why they have this sort of concern in a way. I think we need to strike a balance here in terms of this. Maybe the DAOs should be fully on the clear, rather than basically touching upon any sort of legal jurisdiction there. So I don't know if it is possible or not, but I think the time will tell us.
I think
in that respect.
I checked today morning that deep DAO, the numbers. We have more than 5,000 DAOs now with the numbers 24 billion plus. And the last year it was less than $1 billion.
Yeah.
So all of them are good, or all of them are, half of them are good. We don't know, but people are experimenting.
Right.
People are really trying it out. See that, which is actually a good thing. And the government is intervening. If SEC is saying there's certain things, certain restrictions are being put up there, which is also good because people will try to invent on it, and which will try to refine stuff, and we would see. Time will tell us in few years.
Well put, definitely.
And to put the power of the DAO, think of WikiLeaks and Julian Assange.
Yeah, there's a DAO for that too.
Right? There is, and I want to make that contrast. If WikiLeaks was created as a DAO, we would still continue to enjoy that kind of journalism. But unfortunately, because it was created as a centralized organization and governments were able to point at the founder and put him in jail for a decade, 11 years now, that's the end result. There's a DAO now to save Julian Assange and collecting money to get him to basically get him out of British jail. So DAOs, I think the big distinction is how decentralized this thing was at inception. If it was really decentralized, nobody can really touch it. If there was identifiable organization with benefits, with especially financial benefits, then it's not really a DAO, and it's more of a extension of that company with liabilities, with regulatory oversight and everything that comes with it. So the successful DAOs out there are really the ones that are created just like Bitcoin. Hey, create something and let the community manage it and take life on its own.
Any good examples for successful DAOs?
Well, make a DAO.
Make a DAO.
Right?
Make a DAO is a good one.
It's probably the most successful one.
Yeah,
I would say that
they're
constitutional one.
not without the problems of governance also in MakerDAO,
course.
because there's some concentration of powers, and the question like how to create it initially very decentralized is a big challenge, because we always have actors who always has, those who have bigger stakes because they were earlier or like they have invested more. Like it's a power dynamics which is very difficult to kind of to resist that, rich get richer and those things. And but I've looked at the recent study of the academics about the DAO's decentralization measures. And guess what was the most decentralized DAO? Not the MakerDAO. It was the ENS, the Ethereum Naming Service DAO. Because they distribute the token proportionally, like if you register the domain in this like an Ethereum address name in this naming system, you receive a token proportionally. So like it was very, very like uniform distributed. So no like concentration of powers because they were just users and they were like unique users.
Yeah, I love it. I love it, definitely. So, any question from the audience? I know DAOs are tricky.
Or do we put you to sleep?
But I basically just wanted to sort of make it more concrete, put it on like in bone and flesh. So that's why we need to sort of storytell at some point, right? Otherwise, it would be just just an abstract concept in a way. But we have some concrete examples, but perhaps it's better if we do that way. That would be my last point for you guys. So let's assume that this room is creating a DAO, and let's put a purpose behind that. What would that be? So basically, we are just turning this room. We are renting it. I'm just speculating. Help me out, please. We are just basically renting this room, and we are going to sort of, put a good, commercial purpose behind that. But we are getting together to make sure that it's happening. Okay? So that could be a DAO, correct?
Right. Absolutely.
Okay. What would be the to-dos and not to-dos for that?
The very first thing is the voting structure and agreeing people on a certain rules of governance. Okay, we've gathered together. What's our goal? And what do we do in different circumstances? I.e., if we need to fundraise, what do we fundraise for? How long do we fundraise for? And then the next thing is, well, once we've done that, how do we spend that money? Because usually, in this day and age, whatever you do, you need some capital behind it. That's in most cases the unavoidable nature. And then once you decide on that, then creating a very good follow-through governance, i.e., we don't need a whole DAO to be voting on the $50 expense, right? Or how do we incorporate in a specific jurisdiction now that we need to make an impact in that particular jurisdiction, for example? And from there, how does the DAO designate people to act on its behalf? And are these people potentially liable or not liable for the actions they take against the DAO and so forth? And excellent point that you brought about the anonymity. It's a good thing and a bad thing. Do we stay anonymous being part of this, or is everybody going to be? And there's no straight answer on that, unfortunately, because if I'm creating a DAO that will be releasing hacked or somehow illegally gotten pictures of Pentagon documents, I would want everybody to be anonymous in that DAO.
That's correct.
Right? That's just by design. But at the same time, if I want to create a DAO that will have real world ramifications in terms of actions, I wouldn't want a bunch of anonymous names, which might turn out to be the same rich guy with lots of money, creating accounts and contributing to the DAO in order to influence it, I wouldn't want one particular rich person to be able to influence a particular outcome of an issue that we're all gathered up here to do. So, and these are actually very easily fixable, if you wish. If the common purpose is about influencing something, then you want to know who's influencing, right? But if the common purpose is, hey, we're doing something that the society normally wouldn't do because it strikes right at the heart of the current problem, then you want to stay anonymous, right? If you're going to expose a government problem, if you're going to expose a societal problem, you want to stay anonymous. That's just by definition.
Yeah, I think you did explain it very well. The only few additional things which we want to add is, so there is a communication platform. Like, how do you inform everybody and how do you educate people on this thing? Like, now one of the challenges is to educate each one because they need to be voting on which is right or which is wrong. And when people are voting, again in DAO, we find that people try to influence you.
Yes.
To vote into their certain direction. Okay. And, so that should not happen, right? Then once you came up with the business plan, once you came up with the communication plan, once you raise the money, then you need to have DAO to be operated. You need a platform to implement all these smart contracts so that decisions get executed, right? For example, if you are renting this, the monthly you get the rent, smart contract will split that rent, pay as a dividend to everybody, right? It happens automatically, right? So you need to have a platform build up, so you build all the solutions. Then again, some of the strengths of DAO is, one is transparency. Like everybody sees what actions are taken. Do you want that much transparency? You don't want transparency, right? Then the other example I mentioned, like low water turnout, when that happens, like then can decision be taken long to implement? It's a classic example of the very first DAO called the DAO. When that deep bug was identified, then the guy who was stealing the money is every day stealing money.
Yep.
And everybody sees and watching it because my money is going away from my account. And for them, they cannot stop that. Because the smart contract cannot be stopped. It is running on one of the Ethereum nodes. The only thing I can do is the smart contract, to stop the smart contract, has to be voted among us. And a consensus has to be reached to stop that particular thing, right?
And put a new one in place.
And put a new one in place, which takes time. And they couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And the only workaround they found was, let's also steal from that particular account to another account, so that the guy actually stealing won't be able to steal the entire money, right?
Yeah.
So they use the same defect to take out the money from that particular account, put it in another account, so that they didn't lose the every money, every part. So there's a lot of challenges associated with this one. So when you come into the real world, but it's a good example. It's good you brought it up. I wish instead of room renting, maybe an insurance for everybody sitting here. Yeah. That's a good one. Like now, all the coders in DAO, since they don't work directly, right, for a company, they are just contributors. For every contribution, they get money. They find that they don't have insurance, medical insurance. So they all assemble, we create a DAO. We all contribute. We get insurance. It's a good idea. But actually, community insurance has been there for long.
Oh, mutual companies. Mutual companies are effectively DAOs.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Like or cooperatives.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Actually, to be contrarian, so, I think it's going to be difficult, if not impossible at all, to create a DAO for the people in this room, because it's first and the most about the mission, and we should be really about the same mission. And this comes with, I don't know, with the movement of the heart, and sometimes we have different whys why we do something. So it will be very difficult to find one common mission for all of us here in the room, even in this room.
That's an insurance I mentioned.
Yeah, even like this. Yeah. So, but what I maybe would recommend is to look at if you want to look at the DAOs, look at some list of the different DAOs in the area you like. For example, if you're in climate or in, charity, look at the DAOs which are active there, and look at the community chats, the discords, and maybe you get excited about what they discuss and what they do. And if you feel this movement of heart, you will then join it even without money, just doing some work for free because you so much enjoy this mission. So this is, I think, all about this.
And there's another type of DAOs that we didn't quite cover, but what if you use a DAO as a research project or as a way to create science or to create new ways? Because one of the biggest challenges in science is that everybody's like this, hiding behind Chinese walls, right? But what if you create a project in which researchers from around the world, let's say you're working on a cancer treatment or whatever it might be, instead of everybody doing, and we're all humans, we all have 98% and above the same DNA. So naturally, when we're faced with a problem, we tend to have a very similar approach on initial to solve it. And if all of us are doing the same, we're most likely replicating the same research, right? What if we allocate the work so everybody looks at different corners of the issue as opposed to all looking at the same corner and replicating each other? And then we come back after a month or two or whatever time frame, we say, okay, the three of us ended up in dead ends, but you ended up with some promising results. Now we're going to take your area and split it up again with the next round of the DAO. And so you can use DAOs as a very effective ways of splitting up work and creating value on a community basis by allowing even the people that came up with nothing. I ended up in a dead end, but I still ended up, because I did the work, I am being rewarded for that. I have a percentage of the project, which is, in a lot of cases, knowing where not to go is as valuable as knowing where to go.
Yeah.
Right? So effectively, using DAOs for research, I think, is one of the big areas that we'll see serious growth on an international level.
Thank you very much. Maybe I might be wrong in terms of this recap, but my conclusion would be I like DAOs very much because they're good technology tools for idea or purpose collectives. And they help the starters, the launchers, to tap into the money in the crypto space, Web3 space, right, easily. So they are quite easy. And it's not, basically, they're not burdened by the regulations in a way, so far. So third one is, as long as they stick to, and they develop, design, and they stick to the set of rules they have developed, internally, I think they are very good, transparent, integral, as well as, accountable sort of community collectives in a way. I think they promise a lot. Again, as Gigo said, it's an experimentation currently. So, but I believe in the near future we will see more and more, successful, sort of booming DAOs. I think they are doable. So even, you guys, you can come up with an idea, bring people around that by sort of tapping into this technology tool. So they are quite doable, they are feasible, and I think they are very much purpose-driven. So. They're good democratic tools. Thank you very much for listening to us. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Sergey, I will leave it to you.